Well, welcome back to week 4. This is a kind of a mini week. We're going to put a little layer on our commercial revolution. That's what we discussed last week. So I want to just dive right into it. So let's go right in. So we looked last week at the commercial revolution. This is 17th, 18th centuries. The discovery of the New World has sort of established new resources, new potential, new opportunities. Europe in particular is looking for new places to build up its resources and its trade, both with the East, Far East, as well as in the New World. And so they're looking for commodities. They're looking for goods, sugars, coffees, tobaccos. They're looking to extract or mine silver and gold. They're looking also to do this through monopolies, trade monopolies. We looked at that last week in our second video. But this, of course, presented some problems, some issues. They wanted it, the opportunity was there, but there were some problems that rose with that. We looked at, well, if I need to transport across the Atlantic and across the oceans, I need bigger vessels to carry the cargo. They need to be faster vessels. We need finance. We need money and insurance to be able to do this. We need the science, the innovation to figure out how to better navigate, how to cultivate crops and get the highest yield, how to extract out of the bottoms and depths of the earth the silvers and gold. Last week in our third video, we looked at the need for labor, and we talked about the Atlantic slave trade. And I introduced you to one of my favorite authors, is Thomas Sowell. He wrote, I sent out a little mini-series, a little chapter from one of his books called The Real History of Slavery. I'm going to put a link up here in your top right screen. That is the audio book of him reading that particular chapter in case you are better at listening and following along at the same time. It really is important to grasp slavery in a global sense, in a historical sense, not just in the or through the lens of American 21st century. So that was last week, and we were going to continue talking about that in class. We're going to continue to have discussions. Please feel free to post comments if you happen to have read it and want to talk about it. But this week, I want to look at the last part, the big problem, and that is the deal of rivalries at sea, rivalries for resources and the settlements and the ports of trade. Particularly France and Britain are like the two biggest fighters. They're trying to get it. Spain's involved, the Dutch are involved, Portugal is involved. But they're looking for a way to build the Navy, build their mobile armies so that they could take these armies into foreign lands and control what they are trying to control. Particularly in these colonies, they need the might, the policing to be able to protect that resource, those investments, and those enterprises that they're trying to do to build up the wealth, build up the strength and might of their own nation. So that's where we're going to look at today, and that is through this buildup of might we are going to call the military revolution. Now, this is the birth, so to speak, I just kind of nicknamed that, the birth of the military revolution. And you can see here both the French Revolution and the American Revolution. That's not the kind of revolution I'm referring to. I'm referring to, similarly to the commercial revolution, this is an explosion, a massive and very rapid change in how things are evolving in the world, in society. And our military, the military of the world, is undergoing super fast change. But before we do that, we got to look at, well, what was traditionally true? How did the military operate prior to this time? To the need of the commercial revolution kind of spurring on the need for more might and greater power. Well, traditionally, you're dealing with animals and swords and arrows and spears and things of that sort. Fighting was done on the back of animals, whether it be off of horses or camels or even elephants. These are all different ways that people moved around. And they did it with arrows, they did it with spears, and they did it with some very fundamental traditional ways of doing war. Yes, they had things like chariots that were considered pretty awesome. They were the tanks of their time. Many ships were rowed, man-powered or wind-powered, that carried fighting men on board rather than real armament on board. Castles and fortresses were built. These were single-walled, or usually single-walled. Sometimes it had two. But you know, the higher the wall, the thicker the wall, you could just lay siege to them for years and not get through. And that was sort of like a way of protection. That was a way of doing that. About the 1600s, we had the development of a particular kind of gun called the musket. This was a, ram the powder and wad down the barrel, put a little ball in, put it pound, 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 aim it up, flint. It's like a little spark. You light the flint, pull the trigger, the flint came forward, ignited the gunpowder, and shot the ball out. What do you do next? Do you just like and start again? No, you had to do that entire process all over again. So it was very cumbersome, very not very efficient way. It was deadly, but it wasn't a very efficient way of fighting. So traditional versus modern. Traditional versus after the military revolution. Military revolution, we saw three areas that really blossomed. Artillery, cannons, mobile firepower, some really big, massive cannons, and they had a much farther reach. They could really lob some serious firepower. Military engineering was another category of change. Warships, huge, massive, 30 plus cannons on board, could go out and protect the seas against pirates or against competition that was trying to capture or take over cargo that is traveling back and forth. Advanced architecture was another one. Rather than just the simple castle or fortress, they really began to invest in some engineering kind of thought in how to best fortify people and things that they wanted safeguarded. So we'll look at that. And then the final area was in military tactics and training. What was involved in building up a professional soldier who was taught and trained to fight? That was their career, so to speak. To lead, to strategize. New battle tactics, how we fought, how we engaged the enemy was a new one. And then, of course, there's the staffing and the logistics. We had a new breed of military that sort of blossomed during this time. And we're going to look at all those particular categories, those three categories, in our next video. So stand by, hold on, because we're about to go into it next.